Hey, so I'm sitting here working with somebody and a teammate on a function report. So I'm looking at some information that the client provided. And you know how, we have a whole playlist on function report. So I strongly urge you to, when you're doing your function report, look at some of the specifics. I don't do a big beginning to end function report video 2 hours long because I really think people have particular issues with particular questions and they might just want to hear about that one. I figured it'd be easier to get through. So here's one where, we talk about how sometimes these questions they're not what you think they are asking about, or it is a question that actually is asked in different places, in different ways that can cause you to answer differently, which can seem inconsistent. So I wanted to give you an example. If you go to number 20, 20 is a huge one. It is a really important one. Um, I'm all over it on every function report, and I discuss a lot of things with my clients on this one. But if you scroll down to C, 20C, how far can you walk before needing to stop and rest? So let's say someone says 100 feet. That's someone who's very impaired with walking, obviously. Something's very wrong with ambulating. Um, and you'll notice right after that, it says, if you have to rest, how long before you can resume walking? Let's say the person says 3 minutes. Okay, 100 feet and 3 minutes. And that's very possible. But let's go back to the shopping question. This is number 16. Probably on most function reports. The version I use is getting a little dated, but all the questions are the same on every version. So um, it asks if you do any shopping. So if you don't do any shopping, you wouldn't respond, right? And then it says, if you do any shopping, do you shop? And then you check all that apply. In stores, by phone, by mail, by computer. So if you're putting in store, so if you do go to the store, and I would say, let's say you used to go to the store, but you haven't gone in a year, that probably means you don't go to the store anymore. So I think it's fair to say no. If you went last week, different story. If you went last month, maybe you still go monthly. So you want to be honest, but if you haven't done something in a year, you probably don't do it anymore. If it's something that would normally be something that someone does at least every month and you haven't done it in a year, that seems like it's kind of like an activity of the past. But so a person says they shop for food, and that's typical, and that's fine. You don't really have to get into the detail of what kind of food. Now, if you look down on 16, it then asks you how often you shop and for how long. Think about that. If you're walking into a store, like say this particular person, and he's in there for 20 minutes and he is resting for 3 minutes after every 100 feet. I'm not really good with distances, but so 100 feet, is that an aisle length perhaps? It was basically saying at every aisle I rest. Now, if the person doesn't indicate he has a cane or a wheelchair or is in a store scooter, that could be a little, hmm, not a really credible answer. The person could have meant that he has a cart and he leans on it. A lot of people do that. They don't want to go in the electric cart. A lot of people are embarrassed to use them. Uh, Sometimes they end up getting over the embarrassment. But if you use the cart to lean on, I strongly suggest you include it here under the shopping question, because it's going to point out that you're not walking in a normal fashion with two arms free to say, carry something, grab something. Okay. All right. So going back to the walking question. Oh, and the frequency. All right, so let's say this is going back to shopping. Pardon me, guys. If you say you shop every 2 to 3 days because it's a short little 20-minute job, and this is true for some people because they don't buy a lot at a time. They don't want it to go bad. It's usually like the milk and things like that. 2 to 3 days, I'd say, is on the more frequent side that I see. I often see once a week. I sometimes see once every 2 weeks or once a month. Um, if this is like your plan is to go every 3 times a week to just get the little things, but it doesn't happen, you're going to want to make that clear. This is about what you do, not about what you plan to do, hope to do, used to do, right? If you elsewhere in your report talk about being in bed 5 days a week due to it could be severe pain symptoms, fatigue, etc., it might not, and it really depends on everything, but give the whole eyeball to the whole function report. Does that sound like someone who would then go every 2 or 3 days to a grocery store? If their time is that limited in terms of being up and out of bed, it might look like one of those descriptions is not accurate. And I'm not saying it's necessarily so, but you have to realize that you have a stranger reading it who doesn't know you. So just be very careful. Going back to the walking, what was that, 20? See, when they say if you have to rest, how long before you can resume walking? Of course, I do always recommend that people test themselves. Like, you don't know. Um, Sometimes people just don't walk because they don't have to. They go to the mailbox. They're not working, so they're stuck at home. Um, Oftentimes the mailbox is actually the duration of what they can do. Sometimes they have to rest when they get to the mailbox and come back. So these are things I think you want to find out for sure. Give it a go. If you're just guessing, that's not a good idea, because if you're guessing, it will come out. If you're incorrect, and guessing often leads to inaccuracies, it's going to come out when a question is asked in another way. So you notice here we have the walking question direct, and we have the shopping question, which generally involves walking for most people. And most people don't realize that they should be describing it differently if they're doing it differently. If they're in a shopping cart, if they are using the cart as a handle, and that is very common. I go out with my 80-year-old mother, and she always uses a cart. Never ever walks around without a cart. So it's what you don't say that could put a fork in it. If you just add the realities of how the walking is different because you're doing it with a cart, or you you're using a walking rolling walker, or you use the store cart, whatever the case may be. If it's flat out walking, it's flat out walking. You could say very slowly, I stop at the end of each aisle. But here's the thing, if you stop at the end of each aisle and you're resting just by standing, it might paint a slightly different picture. So be clear on what you're doing. Um, Another thing I always really suggest on the walking, aside from making sure it's consistent with your shopping experience, they leave it open-ended. How long, if you have to rest, how long before you can keep walking? Continue walking. Resume walking, I think they say. So here we have 3 minutes. That's all it says. The assumption here is then that you can resume walking, which I'm sure that's what the person meant. But then it leaves it very open for, because there's nothing to suggest otherwise, that you could then walk for another, in this case, it was 100 feet, and then rest for 3 minutes, do another 100 feet, rest for 3 minutes. You could do that all day long. I suggest, if you have a limitation to how many times you could repeat that, walk for 100 feet, rest 3 minutes, walk for 100 feet. Or if it's walk 2 blocks, rest for 5, whatever, I would suggest that you say, I need the 3 minutes to rest. I could do it again, but after that time, I'd have to rest longer. I'd have to go lie down, or I wouldn't be doing it a third time or a fifth time. You don't, if you are not going to be able to repeat that for an 8-hour workday, you want to make sure that's clear, because otherwise, um, that could be leaving some jobs available that would not be otherwise available, where you only have to go a few feet at a time and rest in between, um, all day long. And if that's not something you can do, you want to make sure it's probably noted here. I think so, because I'm a little anal. Anyway, so things to think about on your function report when you're talking about walking. Incidentally, that's not to say you don't think about every other question where you have implied a walking aspect to it that might be inconsistent with 20C. Shopping's just one of them. So you want to, for everything you answer, you want to look at your report and see if anything is inconsistent with that, because you might not be thinking about it properly, and therefore you're giving an inaccurate picture of what's really going on with you. Okay. That's the things that we are kind of trying to dig out. So I will talk to you later. I hope that helps, guys. Function report number 20 and number 16. Talk to you later.